The company dinner was supposed to be a celebration. A few too many glasses of cheap Cabernet and some forced small talk about Q3 projections, the usual stuff. I was sitting at a massive circular table at the Capitol Grill, feeling thoroughly awkward as I always do at these things. I'm Luke, by the way. I work in corporate finance, which means I spend 90% of my time staring at spreadsheets that would make a rock weep. Tonight was a rare moment where my face wasn't illuminated by a monitor, but by the warm, slightly greasy glow of a $1,000 steakhouse. Right across from me was James. James is my deskmate. He's the kind of guy who claps his hands together and says, "Let's crush this," every Monday morning. He's all smiles, loud ties, and a permanent, faintly too confident scent of cologne. His wife, Chloe, wasn't there. She usually skips these things, which is why the events of the evening were so utterly jarring. We were mid-conversation about the firm's terrible coffee machine, a topic of truly passionate debate in our office, when my phone buzzed on the linen tablecloth. It was a text notification, but the name on the lock screen made my breath hitch. It was from Chloe, James's wife. My first thought was, wait, how does she have my number? Then, why would she be texting me? I discreetly picked up the phone, angling the screen away from James, who was loudly regaling the table with an anecdote about his golf handicap. I unlocked the screen. The message read, "Honey, I'm so sorry I couldn't make it tonight. Tell me about the food. He's still at your desk, isn't he?" My brain short-circuited. Honey? She called me honey? I stared at the word, my mind cycling through every logical explanation. Typo. Definitely a typo. She meant to text James. But why is she texting me to tell me she couldn't make it to a dinner with her own husband? And then, the last 5 words of the text replayed in my head like a scratched record. "He's still at your desk, isn't he?" My throat suddenly felt like sandpaper. I glanced at James. He was laughing, totally oblivious, his wine glass halfway to his mouth. The fluorescent lights of the restaurant seemed to dim slightly as a terrifying possibility began to creep its way into my mind. Was it possible? Was she mistaking me for her husband's lover? Or, maybe, was James doing something shady, and she thought he was hiding out at my desk, with someone else? But the honey, that's what really twisted the knife. It was too intimate, too casual for a simple mistake. It implied a familiarity, a closeness that simply didn't exist between us. Chloe and I had only met twice, briefly, at prior company events. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This wasn't just a wrong number. This was a direct, accidental glimpse into the very private, possibly very troubled, marriage of my coworker. A coworker who I had to sit next to for 8 hours a day. 5 days a week. I had to respond. I had to clear the air immediately before this spiraled into a nightmare scenario involving a confused wife, a suspicious husband, and my suddenly endangered career. I opened the text field, my fingers shaking slightly over the tiny keyboard. "Hi Chloe, this is Luke. I think you have the wrong number. I'm sitting across from James right now at the dinner." I typed it out, reread it twice, and almost hit send. But then I hesitated. If I sent that, how would she react? Would she be mortified? Or would it sound like a cover-up? Like the other man, trying to play dumb? The phrase, "He's still at your desk, isn't he?" suggested a pattern, a repeated excuse. She wasn't asking a general question. She was accusing a specific situation. I deleted the message. I needed to wait, to think, to observe James. I put the phone back down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to join the conversation, forcing a smile, but all I could hear was the frantic internal screaming, "Honey, he's still at your desk, isn't he?" It felt like a bomb had just been placed under the table, and only I knew the timer was ticking. The celebratory dinner had just become an interrogation room. Drop a comment below and tell me what time and where you're watching this video. I need to know I'm not the only one who's been blindsided by a text message. James leaned in, his voice dropping slightly. "So, Luke, about that coffee machine. I think we need to petition for a better one. Right? Are you okay, man? You look like you just saw a ghost." I managed a weak laugh. No, I'm fine, James. Just thinking about those Q3 reports. You know how it is." I lied through my teeth, while all I could think about was the phone lying face up on the table, a silent witness to a potential betrayal. The first message was bad enough. What if a second one followed? What if this wasn't a mistake at all? The weight of the secret, the potential scandal, was suddenly crushing. It wasn't my problem, but it was sitting right there in my pocket on my phone. The simple word, honey, had turned an ordinary Tuesday night into the start of something truly awful. I took a large, desperate sip of water, trying to wash away the sudden, metallic taste of fear. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life at the office, and potentially James's marriage, had just changed forever. I couldn't shake the image of that text. Honey. It was clinging to me like cheap cologne. My initial panic over the text message gave way to a cold, hard curiosity about the man sitting across from me, James. To understand the full, sick irony of what was unfolding, you need to understand James and our dynamic. We didn't just share a row of cubicles, we shared a massive, U-shaped desk. Our monitors almost touched. We were forced to be in each other's orbits for most of the workday. James, as I mentioned, is the let's crush this type. He's 38, married, 2 kids, judging by the constantly updated photo rotation on his desk, which, by the way, included a very happy-looking Chloe. He's a man who projects an image of utter, effortless success, loud ties, louder laugh, and always ordering the most expensive thing on the lunch menu. He's the office's resident golden boy, the guy who gets the big accounts and the pat on the back from the CEO. He was the definition of man who has it all. And that made the whole situation 10 times worse. If anyone in our office was going to have a secret affair, a messy double life, it wouldn't be the quiet, spreadsheet-loving Luke. It would be James, the guy who thrived on risk and attention. But here's the thing about James. He was also incredibly, almost annoyingly, committed to his wife and kids, or at least, that's what he wanted everyone to believe. He would take conference calls with Chloe right next to me, always ending them with a saccharine, "Love you, hon." He had a strict rule. He was home by 6:30 p.m. every night for dinner, even if he had to log back on later. He talked about Chloe a lot. He'd brag about her cooking, her career as a graphic designer, and their weekend plans. He made his family his entire personal brand at work. This is why, when I saw that text from Chloe, my first thought was honestly a defense of James. She must have the wrong number. Because the image he projected was simply too perfect to be covering up a lie. He had constructed this flawless facade of domestic bliss right in front of me for 3 years. As James continued to chat with the table about his latest investment idea, something involving blockchain and exotic spice markets, I took the opportunity to study him. Did he look guilty? Was there a nervous twitch? Was he avoiding my eye? He looked exactly like James, confident, slightly self-important, and entirely in his element. He was utterly unaware that I was holding a digital grenade that his wife had accidentally dropped in my lap. I remembered something else, a detail I'd initially dismissed as mere office quirkiness, but which now took on a sinister new meaning, the overtime routine. James and I often stayed late. Our deadlines were brutal, and we were generally the last 2 people in our section. But instead of sitting at his own desk, James would always migrate over to my desk once the office cleared out. "It's quieter over here, mate," he'd always say, pulling a visitor chair right up to my corner of the U-shaped workspace. "The light hits better for late-night reading." He'd spend hours there, sometimes scrolling on his personal laptop, sometimes just reading reports. I never questioned it. I was too busy staring at my own spreadsheets. We'd work in near silence, occasionally exchanging a tired joke. It was strange, but I just thought he found my corner of the desk a good luck charm. But now, Chloe's message echoed, "He's still at your desk, isn't he?" It suddenly clicked. James wasn't migrating to my desk for the light. He was migrating to my desk, the quiet corner, the least visible spot from the hallway, to conduct something private. Was he texting someone? Was he FaceTiming his real honey? Was he engaging in some kind of clandestine activity that he couldn't do at his own, more exposed, cubicle? I felt a cold shiver. The overtime routine wasn't an innocent quirk. It was a well-practiced alibi. When Chloe asked where he was, he could say, truthfully, I'm still at Luke's desk wrapping up a few things. It was a subtle, brilliant way to tell the truth while hiding the truth. And if Chloe thought I was the mistress, then every time he said, "I'm at Luke's desk," she pictured him with me. Which made the honey even more specific and terrifying. I reached for my phone again, the desire to text back growing into a frantic need. I had to stop the delusion. I had to protect myself from being unknowingly dragged into this mess. If James's marriage exploded, I didn't want the shrapnel hitting my reputation. I typed a new message, more cautious this time. "Hi Chloe, this is Luke from James's office. I think your husband is covering his tracks, but I need you to know I'm not involved. You texted the wrong person." Again I paused. Too confrontational. Too much information. It basically said, "Your husband is cheating and he's using my desk as his cover." That was not a text I wanted on my phone. I realized I couldn't resolve this with a text message. I was stuck. I was an unwilling participant in a story I hadn't signed up for. I looked at James again, his face flushed with wine and the thrill of his own voice. He seemed like a caricature of a loving husband, and yet, the evidence on my phone suggested a much darker reality. I put the phone in my pocket. The steakhouse ambience, the clinking of glasses, the forced cheerfulness, it all felt nauseatingly fake. The perfection of James's life, the meticulous image he had curated, was starting to crack, and I was the only one who saw the fracture. I just knew that the first text was only the beginning. The second one, if it came, would be the real confirmation of the nightmare. I tried to focus on the conversation, on the steak, on anything but the phone burning a hole in my pocket. James was still holding court, now moving on to the riveting topic of his recent landscaping efforts. He seemed blissfully unaware that I was internally screaming the words, "Honey, he's still at your desk, isn't he?" over and over again. I forced a laugh at one of his terrible dad jokes. I had to look normal. If James suspected I knew something, or worse, if he suspected his wife had accidentally contacted me, the entire dynamic of our professional relationship, and thus, my ability to function at work, would implode. I needed to slip away, go to the restroom, and figure out my next move. I was just about to make my excuse when my phone vibrated again, this time with a sharp, insistent buzz that was impossible to ignore. It was another text. From Chloe. My stomach performed a full, agonizing flip. This was it. The confirmation. The second shoe dropping. I snatched the phone off the table before James could notice. I angled my body, pretending to check the time, and quickly read the screen. The new message was short, but it hit me like a physical blow. "I know. Don't lie to me. He's always there late. Just tell me who else is with him. It's not you, is it?" I froze. My internal narrative had been completely wrong, and yet, simultaneously right. First, the fear. She didn't believe my initial silence was due to a wrong number. She was already convinced her husband was using my desk for shady business. The phrase, "I know. Don't lie to me," suggested she had been watching, waiting, or at least highly suspicious. The first text, the one that called me honey, was not a simple mistake. It was her throwing a line out, hoping to catch him or his accomplice, and she'd accidentally snagged me. Second, the confirmation. James was doing something he shouldn't be. The fact that she was absolutely certain he was always there late and demanding to know who else is with him proved that my initial suspicions about the overtime routine were spot on. He wasn't working at my desk, he was meeting, talking to, or texting someone he shouldn't. And finally, the relief, immediately followed by a new terror. "It's not you, is it?" She was clearly operating under the assumption that the person her husband was meeting or dealing with was a woman, and that I, a man, was just a poor, unwitting patsy. A friendly coworker whose desk served as the perfect cover. The honey was likely meant for the real, other woman. And it was my contact information she'd confused with the accomplices. I felt a brief, dizzying wave of relief. I'm not the mistress. But that relief evaporated instantly as I realized the new, far more dangerous position I was in. Chloe wasn't accusing me of cheating with her husband. She was accusing me of covering for him. She saw me as an accessory, a loyal subordinate who was protecting his boss's dirty secret. My silence, My failure to reply to the first text had been interpreted as an admission of guilt. In her mind, I was already lying. My hands were clammy. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a full-blown conspiracy theory, and I was unknowingly cast as a central villain. I could not let this stand. If Chloe became convinced that I was shielding her cheating husband, she could make my life a living hell, or worse, she could contact HR, accusing me of workplace misconduct or collusion. I finally managed to excuse myself from the table, muttering something about needing air. I practically ran to the deserted hallway outside the main dining room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I typed a frantic response, dropping all pretense of subtlety. Chloe, please read this carefully. This is Luke, James's deskmate. I am a man. I am sitting in the restaurant right now, 10 feet away from your husband. He has no idea you texted me. I am not involved in anything. I have no idea who he is with at my desk. You have the wrong number for the other person. You need to stop texting me now before he sees it. Please. I hit send. It was blunt, desperate, and potentially reckless, but I had to clear my name. I felt a momentary surge of clarity. I had established my innocence, laid out the facts, and told her to stop. Problem solved, right? Wrong. A reply came back instantly. Oh, so now you're trying to protect him, Luke? I figured he'd have his whole office running interference. You're lying. Why are you texting me instead of letting him use his own phone? I know he makes you stay late. You're just doing what he tells you. Tell me the truth. Is it Sarah from accounting? Just tell me. My jaw dropped. My attempt at clarity had only cemented her suspicion. The more I denied it, the more convinced she became that I was a pawn in James's game. She'd layered the conflict. It wasn't just James's infidelity, it was now my integrity and my workplace loyalty that were being questioned. She had turned a mistaken text into a moral dilemma, a test of my character. I leaned against the cold marble wall, my head spinning. I was now actively, digitally confronting the digital ghost, James's wife, and she was winning. I had become the obstacle, the last line of defense James's alleged affair. The stakes had been raised exponentially. I was no longer an observer, I was a hostage in a marital war I didn't even know was being fought. I knew right then that I would have to talk to James, no matter how awkward, dangerous, or job-threatening it might be. I walked back to the table, my face fixed in what I hoped was a neutral, professional mask, but inside, I felt like I was wearing James's loud tie, garishly out of place and suffocating. The soup course had arrived, and James was busy telling an accountant about his incredible Peloton stats. The irony was thick enough to cut with a spoon. I sat down, picking up my water glass, trying to regain my composure. The last text from Chloe, I figured he'd have his whole office running interference. You're lying, was still ringing in my ears. She had framed me as the accessory, the loyal foot soldier covering for the general. This wasn't just about his cheating anymore. It was about my reputation, my moral standing in the eyes of a very angry woman. I realized I couldn't ignore James anymore. This was my life now. The next day, the office felt different. The light was the same sickly fluorescent hue, the keyboards clicked with the usual rhythm, but for me, the air was suddenly charged with secrecy and dread. James was his usual self, loud and cheerful, but every time he clapped me on the shoulder or asked me about my weekend, I felt a tremor of revulsion. I was sitting next to a man who had not only constructed an elaborate lie, but had also, accidentally, made me the centerpiece of his deception. I had to bring it up. I waited until the office was relatively quiet, mid-morning, when most people were heads down in their work. Hey, James, I said, keeping my voice low and casual, pretending to look at a report on his monitor. Yeah, mate? Got a bug in your spreadsheet? He asked, not looking up. No. Look, I need to ask you something kind of personal and please, just don't freak out, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. He finally looked up, his brow furrowed. Personal? What's up, Luke? Is this about the fantasy football draft? No. It's about Chloe, I said, the name hanging in the air like a siren. His face changed instantly. The confident, blustering James vanished. His eyes widened and he leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh, controlled murmur. What about Chloe? Did she call here? Is everything okay? She texted me last night, I whispered, watching his reaction like a hawk. His mouth went dry. She texted you? Yeah. By mistake, I think. She called me honey and asked if you were still at my desk. The silence that followed was deafening. James stared at me, his face going through a rapid-fire series of emotions. Confusion, fear, and then a horrifying, calculating look. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just seemed to process the sheer, unlucky magnitude of his wife's error. He reached over and grabbed my arm, a tight, desperate grip. Luke, man, you can't tell anyone about this. No one. Especially not her. Did you text her back? Yes, I did. I told her it was a mistake, that I was Luke, that I was a guy. And that's when it got worse, James. She thought I was covering for you. She thinks you're meeting someone at my desk and that I'm your accomplice. James closed his eyes, let out a slow, shaky breath, and released my arm. You need to delete those texts, man. Right now. Just completely purge them. And then you need to let me handle it. Handle what, James? The fact that your wife thinks I'm the co-conspirator in your affair? The fact that she's asking me to rat you out? You need to tell me what is going on, right now. I'm not losing my job or my integrity for whatever mess you've created. I was surprised by my own firmness. The fear was still there, but it was now laced with righteous anger. He looked around the office again, then leaned in even closer. Look, there is no affair, look. I swear on my kids, there is no one else. But she's been really suspicious lately. Every time I stay late, she thinks the worst. I scoffed. She had reason to be suspicious, James. Why are you always at my desk then? Why did she think you were meeting someone there? He hesitated, a long, agonizing pause. He chewed on his lip, clearly weighing the cost of honesty. Look, Luke, I have been covering for something. It's not an affair. I've been working on a side hustle. A personal project. It's huge, man, a potential game changer. But it's completely against company policy. If anyone finds out, especially the brass, I'm done. Fired. Litigation. The whole 9 yards. My mind raced. A side hustle? The way he talked about it, it sounded bigger than just freelance work. It sounded like he was using company resources or stealing client data. That was even worse than an affair. That was professional suicide and potentially a crime. And you were doing this at my desk because? Because my cubicle is too exposed. I use your desk because it's the quiet, blind spot. And I tell Chloe I'm at Luke's desk to throw her off the scent of what I'm really doing. I didn't know she was suspicious about cheating. I thought she just worried I was overworking myself. He was still lying, I could feel it. He was spinning this as a harmless, I'm just chasing the dream story, but the sheer panic in his eyes suggested the side hustle was far more sinister. Okay, I said, crossing my arms. So what do we do about Chloe? She still thinks I'm helping you cheat. James pulled out his wallet and took out a business card that wasn't his, a card for a small, independent coffee shop. She's asked me to meet her, he said, the sheer terror in his eyes finally making sense. She wants to meet the person I've been spending all this time with. I tried to cancel, but she insisted. And now, thanks to your little conversation with her, she probably thinks she's finally going to meet her rival. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Luke, I need you to go. I need you to meet her for coffee. You need to tell her, face to face, that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. You're the cleanup crew. You're the one who can defuse this bomb before it explodes. My jaw dropped. The audacity of the request was staggering. He was asking me to go on a coffee date with his wife, pretending to be the other man, just to tell her I wasn't. This was a complete nightmare. This was the ultimate moral dilemma. Protect my coworker and potentially my career, or tell his suspicious wife the truth and watch everything burn down. James's request hung in the air, thick and impossible. I need you to go. You're the one who can defuse this bomb before it explodes. I stared at the coffee shop card in his hand. The coffee bean and leaf. It was a generic place, perfect for clandestine meetings. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of him asking me to willingly walk into a lioness's den to clean up a mess that was entirely his own making almost made me laugh hysterically. "Are you serious, James?" I finally managed, my voice rough with disbelief. "You want me to meet your wife, who already thinks I'm your accomplice, and try to convince her that your suspicious behavior is all just a coincidence?" "Exactly," he hissed, his face a portrait of desperate pleading. "You're the perfect person, Luke. You're completely innocent, which means you can look her in the eye and tell her, with total sincerity, that there's no affair. That I just use your desk for a private side project. You're male, so she won't suspect you're the honey she texted. It shuts down the affair narrative completely. It's the only way to save my marriage and my job. Think about it. If she believes I'm cheating, she'll find out about the side hustle too. It's all connected." He was right about one thing. The cheating accusation and the secret business were intertwined. If she started digging for one, she'd uncover the other, and that would bring the company crashing down on James. And if James went down, there was a high probability I'd be pulled into the fallout, given my involvement with his overtime routine and the fact that his side hustle was conducted at my desk. But the ethical cost of lying for him was immense. I'd be compromising my own moral code, putting myself in a highly volatile situation, and officially becoming an accessory to his deception. I looked at the card, then back at his desperately sincere, lying eyes. I finally gave in, not out of friendship, but out of self-preservation. This was the quickest way to make the problem, which was now my problem, disappear. "Fine, James," I said, sighing heavily. "I'll go. But you owe me. Big time. And I get to tell her whatever I think will get me out of this the fastest." "Yes. Thank you. Whatever you need, consider it done. Just make sure she walks away believing there's no affair, and that you're just a nice, simple guy who lets me use his desk sometimes." He gave me a grateful, sickly sweet smile that made my skin crawl. We spent the next half hour in a highly uncomfortable, low-whisper role-playing session. James told me exactly what to say, deny any knowledge of the text, insist the honey was a huge typo that must have been meant for her sister or a friend, and then pivot to the side hustle narrative. Just say I'm building an app, a financial modeling tool, and it has to be kept secret from the firm, so I use the quietest spot, your desk, to work on it, he coached. "An app?" I questioned. "That's a bit thin, James. Why not just work from home?" "Because I need to access the company network data, anonymously, of course, to stress test it," he lied smoothly. The man was a born con artist. The time for the coffee meeting was set for the next evening. The tension in the office over the rest of the day was unbearable. Every time James looked at me, I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. The moment he stepped away from the desk, I pulled up the text conversation with Chloe one last time. Her last message: "You're lying. Why are you texting me instead of letting him use his own phone? I know he makes you stay late." I was confronting the digital ghost, but this time, it was personal. I typed a brief message to her, confirming the meeting. "Chloe, this is Luke. James asked me to meet you at the Coffee Bean and Leaf tomorrow at 5 p.m. I need to clear my name. I promise you, I have no secrets to hide, but your husband is panicking. Please, just listen to me." I sent it. It was a risky move, acknowledging James's panic, but I wanted her to know I was coming in peace, not as his defender, but as a victim of his secrecy. I wanted to establish myself as someone caught in the crossfire, not the one pulling the trigger. Her reply came almost instantly, 5 p.m. "Don't be late, Luke. I'm tired of being lied to." Her text was cold, sharp, and final. It solidified my fear. She wasn't looking for a polite misunderstanding. She was looking for a confession. I was walking into a trap, armed only with James's flimsy lie about a secret app. I deleted all the messages, just as James had instructed. The screen felt clean, but my conscience did not. I was about to lie to a woman who had been betrayed by her husband, all to save my own professional skin. It was the absolute lowest point of my career. The feeling was a heavy, suffocating weight, the guilt of a good person forced to do a bad thing. I spent the night rehearsing the lie, the secret app story, But every time I spoke the words out loud, they tasted like ash. I knew that the minute I sat down with Chloe, my carefully constructed narrative was going to crumble under the sheer force of her anger and desperation. The only thing I could be sure of was that I was about to make a terrible situation exponentially worse. The day of the coffee meeting felt like a countdown to disaster. Every interaction with James was excruciating. He was manic, jittery, overly complimentary, and clearly terrified. He kept reminding me of the key points of his fictional secret app story, practically whispering the details over the whir of the copy machine. "Remember, Luke, you saw the code." "You know I'm serious," he insisted, wiping sweat from his brow. "I remember, James," I replied, my voice flat. But what I really remembered was the weight of his desperate lie, and the certainty that I was about to become collateral damage. The anxiety was compounded by a small, but deeply suspicious moment I'd initially ignored. It was subtle, almost too insignificant to register, but now, in the shadow of this unfolding drama, it amplified my internal alarm bells. A few days before the dinner, I had reached for my usual chair at the desk. Since James and I shared the large U-shaped structure, we usually just used the chair closest to our respective monitors. But that afternoon, the chairs had been swapped. His slightly better, more ergonomic chair was now at my station. I pulled it out, but James suddenly appeared, his face ashen, rushing over with an urgency that didn't match the situation. Wait, don't sit there," he'd snapped, startling me. "What? It's just a chair, James," I said. "No, I swapped them. The wheel on that one, your original one, is sticking. I didn't want you to hurt your back. I'll just use yours until I can call maintenance." It was a perfectly reasonable explanation, but his reaction was entirely disproportionate. He was trembling slightly. He insisted on wheeling the chairs back to their original positions himself, even though I clearly had his better chair. At the time, I just thought, James is weirdly controlling about office furniture. Now, with Chloe's texts and the alleged side hustle, the desk swap incident felt like a screaming siren. Why would he freak out over a chair swap? The thought hit me like a physical punch. Was he hiding something in the chair? Or, more likely, was he hiding something that was only accessible when he sat in a specific spot at my desk? Maybe a flash drive taped underneath the seat? A note? A microphone? It was probably paranoia, but the incident added another layer of doubt to James's story. He wasn't just working a side hustle, he was being secretive about the location of the work within an inch of his life. I spent the afternoon contemplating this, the suspicion hardening into cynicism. By 4:45 p.m., I was on my way to the Coffee Bean and Leaf. I arrived exactly at 5 p.m. The place was bustling, which was a relief. Maybe the noise would make it harder for Chloe to grill me. I spotted her immediately at a corner booth. She was stunning, not in the flashy way James was, but in a quiet, intense way. She had dark, serious eyes that were currently fixed on me with a palpable mix of fury and raw vulnerability. I walked over, extending my hand awkwardly. "Chloe? I'm Luke." She ignored my hand. "Sit down, Luke. Don't waste my time." Her voice was low and dangerous. I slid into the booth opposite her, feeling immediately pinned by her gaze. I ordered a black coffee, mostly for something to hold. "James told you to come here, didn't he?" she started, not easing into it. She leaned forward, her expression unwavering. "Did he threaten you? Did he promise you a bonus? Because if you're here to give me some BS story about a sudden wrong number that called his desk mate honey, I'm going to walk right out and call my lawyer." I took a breath. I had rehearsed James's lie, but looking into her betrayed eyes, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't add another layer of deceit to her pain. I had to find a middle ground, a way to clear my name without destroying James's career and my own by association. "Chloe, listen to me. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need you to understand one thing. I am not the honey. I am not having an affair with your husband. I am a man who works in corporate finance and who shares a U-shaped desk with James. That's it." She watched me, her gaze unblinking. "Then why did you text me back and say you were lying to protect him?" "I didn't." I texted back to tell you it was a mistake, and you refused to believe me. You told me I was covering for him. I deleted the texts, but I'm telling you the truth. James is completely panicking, not because of an affair, but because he's using my desk to hide something he shouldn't. I decided to use James's lie to tell a deeper truth, the truth of the secrecy, if not the exact nature of the secret. He is working on something extremely sensitive and completely against company policy. He's been using my desk for months because it's the only blind spot from the hallway. When you asked him where he was, he said, Luke's desk, because it was technically true, and he thought it would throw you off. Honeys, I think he must have given the other person, whoever she is, my number by mistake, or maybe it was a contact near mine in his phone. I paused, letting the weight of the confession settle. I was protecting the nature of the secret, but confirming the existence of the deception. Chloe's expression didn't soften, but the anger was momentarily replaced by a cold, calculating analysis. Sensitive project against company policy. What kind of project, Luke? I gave her James's story. He said he's building a finance app. He needs to use company data, anonymously, to test it. If the firm finds out, he'll be fired and potentially sued for intellectual property theft. That's why he's panicking. Not because he's cheating. A silence descended. The noise of the coffee shop faded into a low buzz. Chloe's eyes narrowed. She didn't look relieved, she looked vindicated. So, my husband is not having an affair, but he is a professional liar who is risking his career and our family's security with some illegal side project? Thank you for clarifying. That is so much better. The sarcasm dripped like ice water. I know it doesn't sound good, Chloe, but I promise you, I'm just trying to get out of the middle of this. I came here to tell you I'm not involved. She sighed, running a hand over her face. Her voice was suddenly softer, tired. No, you're not involved. But you're sitting at the perfect vantage point, aren't you? You're the only one he trusts enough to use as an alibi. You're the only one who sees him at that desk every night. She pushed a sugar packet across the table to me. I was completely thrown by her shift in tone. Luke, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I don't care about his app. He can lose his job for all I care. But I need to know the real truth. And I need proof. You're going to help me get it. My stomach dropped again. I realized I hadn't solved the problem. I had simply traded roles. I was no longer the unwilling accomplice to the affair. I was about to become the reluctant spy in a corporate espionage drama. Chloe slid the sugar packet, a crisp white packet from the coffee shop, across the table. It wasn't just a packet of sugar. It felt like a contract, sealed with the bitterness of her betrayal. My relief over proving I wasn't the honey was immediately cancelled out by the sheer weight of her next request. You're going to help me get proof, Luke? She repeated, her voice steady and chillingly calm. I shook my head instantly. No, Chloe. I can't. I work with the man. I came here to tell you I'm not his accomplice. I'm not going to be your spy. Spy, she scoffed, a flicker of genuine hurt crossing her face. I'm not asking you to plant bugs, Luke. I'm asking you to do what you already do, sit at your desk and watch him. She leaned in, her eyes boring into mine. Think about it. You're the last line of defense for his lie. You're his safe zone. If he's really just working on a secret app, fine. But I need to know what he's really hiding. Because the man I married doesn't risk our financial future for an app, Luke. He risks it for something much bigger and much dirtier. Her logic, while manipulative, was terrifyingly sound. I was the perfect, unwilling operative. I had the access, the trust, however misplaced, and the necessary context. The fact that the entire overtime routine was centered on my desk made me the only person who could truly uncover the truth. She picked up the sugar packet I hadn't touched and flipped it over. She had scribbled a phone number on the back, a number that wasn't hers. This is a burner phone, she explained softly. James knows my number, obviously. We're only communicating through this. I need you to text me when he's late. Text me when he comes to your desk. Tell me what he's doing. Is he talking to anyone? Is he bringing in strange equipment? Is he frantic? Just give me the details of his overtime routine. The moral dilemma was agonizing. If I said no, James would continue to use me as his shield, and Chloe would likely escalate, possibly calling HR herself with a vague accusation about his suspicious behavior at Luke's desk, which would still drag me down. If I said yes, I was actively betraying my coworker and crossing a massive ethical line. But at least I'd be controlling the narrative, ensuring the truth, whatever it was, came out in a way that protected my own job. I looked down at the sugar packet. I felt utterly defeated. This whole situation had started with a single, misplaced word, honey, and had rapidly accelerated into a high-stakes ethical standoff. What if it is just an app, Chloe? Asked my voice weak. Then you've wasted 30 minutes of your life and I'll apologize, and this all goes away. But if it's more, if he's doing something illegal, something that could wipe out our savings, something that could hurt other people, then you will have done the right thing, Luke. You will have chosen your conscience over a liar. That last sentence hit me hard. Chosen my conscience over a liar. James was a liar. Even if the lie was about an app, he had still thrown me under the bus, making me complicit in his deceit and risking my career to save his. Did I owe him loyalty? Absolutely not. I took the sugar packet. Okay, I whispered. But I'm not digging, Chloe. I'm just reporting what I see. If I see something that could get me in trouble, I'm out. That's all I ask, she said, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was the smile of someone who had just won a small, terrifying victory. I spent the next week in a state of high alert. Every time James wheeled his chair over to my desk during the late hours, I felt my heart race. I was an unwilling spy, cataloging my coworkers' movements. I started a silent, mental log of his actions. Day 1. James stayed late. He came to my desk. He spent 2 hours on his personal laptop, mostly staring intently at the screen, occasionally typing frantically. I texted Chloe, he's at the desk. Tense. Typing fast. Looks like he's running a program. Day 3. James stayed late again. This time, he brought a briefcase. He kept it on the floor, tucked close to his feet, and was visibly jumpy. I noted the desk swap incident in my mind. He's protecting something he can only access when he's sitting right there. I texted Chloe, brought a briefcase. Won't let it out of his sight. Very paranoid. Day 5, James didn't stay late. He left at the prescribed 6:30 p.m. But as I was leaving at 7 p.m., I noticed something strange about his own desk. It was immaculately clean, almost stripped bare. All his personal effects, the pictures of Chloe, the kids, the small golf trophy, were gone. I texted Chloe immediately, James's desk is totally empty. Not a single photo. Is he planning to leave? Her response was swift and chilling. He's getting ready to bolt. The app story is a lie. Look closer. Look for papers, for client names, for anything that suggests he's taking the company with him. Her text finally clarified the true nature of the secret. This was never about an affair, or even just a simple side hustle. This was about a professional betrayal, a massive, orchestrated move to steal something critical from the firm. The turning point was here. I realized I was not trying to save a marriage, I was trying to prevent a corporate crisis. And James was using the cheating wife narrative as the perfect shield for his escape plan. Chloe's final text. He's getting ready to bolt. The app story is a lie. Look closer, look. Slapped me with the full, terrifying truth. This wasn't a soap opera. It was a corporate heist. The entire overtime routine, the secrecy, the panic, the use of my desk, it was all designed to mask James's professional betrayal. The infidelity angle was just a perfect smoke screen, a delicious bit of gossip that would distract everyone, especially his wife, from the real crime. The next day, I didn't wait for James to come to my desk. I knew I had to act, and I knew exactly where to look, thanks to the bizarre desk swap incident. I waited until James went to a long-scheduled meeting with our firm's biggest client. I was alone at the U-shaped desk. My heart was pounding, but the fear was now overridden by a surge of adrenaline and a desperate need for the truth. I wheeled my chair away and examined the corner where James always sat when he used my desk. The spot was slightly cleaner, which I'd noted before, but that wasn't the clue. I got down on my hands and knees and looked directly underneath the lip of the desk. Nothing. Just dust and old gum wrappers. I remembered the chair swap. James's frantic insistence on using my chair and then forcing the swap back. It wasn't about the chair itself. It was about what was around the chair. I looked at the floor, specifically the carpet tiles in the precise spot where James always placed his feet. And there it was. Not visible to a casual glance, but undeniable once you knew to look. A minuscule, almost invisible slice in the carpet tile, about an inch long, running right next to the desk leg. I carefully wedged the end of a paperclip into the slice and gently lifted the corner of the tile. Beneath it, the firm's raised floor system was exposed. And taped securely to the concrete subfloor, hidden perfectly from overhead view, was a tiny, high-capacity USB drive. My breath hitched. I felt a sick mixture of terror and utter confirmation. This wasn't an app. This was data theft. This drive contained whatever James had been compiling during his overtime routine at my desk. This was his future and the company's nightmare tucked away under my feet. I quickly snatched the drive, slid the carpet tile back into place, and walked straight to the office restroom. I locked myself in a stall and sat down, my hands trembling as I stared at the tiny device. I had the smoking gun. Now came the real turning point. What do I do with it? Give it to Chloe. This fulfills my promise to her. She gets the proof she needs, and she can use it for leverage against James in a divorce, exposing the corporate crime. But this would put a civilian in possession of highly sensitive company data, and it would leave me completely exposed if James found out. Give it to management/HR. This is the ethical, correct choice. It protects the company, it absolves me of any potential guilt, and it exposes James's crime. But James is a master manipulator. He would swear I planted it, that I was working with Chloe to ruin him, and he would point to all the texts and the fact that he was always at my desk to muddy the waters. My career would still be in jeopardy, caught in the crossfire. Confront James. Stupid, reckless, and highly dangerous. He's cornered. I looked at the tiny USB drive again. I didn't need to check the contents. The mere existence of a hidden, corporate-grade storage device was proof enough. The honey text was just a chaotic distraction, a red herring in a very serious game of industrial espionage. I decided on a hybrid approach. I would tell Chloe, but I would use this information for my own protection first. I pulled out the burner phone and texted Chloe the single word, found. Her reply was immediate. What? Where? Under the floor at my desk. A USB. This isn't about cheating, Chloe. It's theft. What do I do now? Her response was calculated and shocking. Hold on to it. Do not open it. Do not give it to anyone at the firm yet. James is leaving for a vacation tomorrow. He needs to be exposed publicly. Look, I want everyone to know the kind of man he is. Give it to me tonight. I know where he's going to be. The farewell dinner. The farewell dinner. Our CEO had planned a small, private dinner to celebrate James's supposed decision to take time off and pursue his entrepreneurial dreams, the very lie James had rehearsed for me. It was the perfect public stage. I realized what Chloe wanted, a final, spectacular act of public humiliation and professional destruction. She didn't want a quiet divorce. She wanted justice, served cold and in front of his peers. This was the ultimate choice, a quiet handoff to HR or a dramatic, career-ending exposure. My instinct was to avoid the drama, but I knew James's charisma and network were powerful. If I gave it to HR quietly, he might manage to spin the story enough to hurt me. A public confrontation with the hard evidence in hand was the only way to ensure he couldn't manipulate the truth one last time. The farewell dinner. I had to go. I had to deliver the final, crushing blow. The farewell dinner, or what I now knew was James's last supper, was set for that night at the same upscale steakhouse where this whole nightmare had begun. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. It felt like a stage set for a final, dramatic reckoning. I was sitting in the corner booth of a relatively empty bar near the office, waiting for the clock to tick toward the dinner. I had the USB drive securely tucked away in an inner pocket. It felt incredibly heavy, a tiny vault holding James's entire disastrous scheme. I texted Chloe the time and location of the dinner. Her reply was succinct, "I'll be there. You bring the evidence. I'll make sure the right people are paying attention." Her cold determination was what convinced me this was the right path. She wasn't blinded by rage, she was operating with surgical precision. She knew James's weaknesses, and she knew the firm's structure. She was playing a long game of justice, and I was her reluctant final piece. I arrived at the dinner precisely on time. It was a small, private room with only the key directors and the CEO present, the exact people who needed to witness James's downfall. James, of course, was in his element, holding court, basking in the glow of his success. He was accepting congratulations on his bold move to chase his entrepreneurial dreams. He looked like the picture of a visionary, a man too big for the small confines of our firm. The lie was so convincing, it was nauseating. He even approached me. "So glad you came, mate. You know, you were integral to this whole thing." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Remember what I said about your desk? That's where the magic happened. Couldn't have done it without that quiet corner. Now, don't worry, the firm will reconfigure that space. You won't be bothered by he paused, winking, my intense focus anymore." He clapped me on the back, completely oblivious to the small, cold metal device I had pressed against my palm. His words were a sickening reminder that he had used my generosity, my professional trust, and even the simple physical space of my desk as the center of his deceit. The honey text wasn't a mistake, it was the butterfly flap that led to this corporate typhoon. I forced a tight smile. "I'll miss the late nights, James." The dinner began. Courses were served, champagne flowed, and the toasts started. The CEO raised his glass and delivered a glowing tribute to James's ambition and his supposed loyalty to the firm. It was all a carefully constructed eulogy to a man who was about to commit grand larceny. This was the moment. I had the stage, the audience, and the undeniable evidence. I needed to act before James could make his final, clean exit. I caught the eye of Chloe. She was standing discreetly in the doorway, talking to the waiter, but her eyes were locked on me, silently urging me forward. She had arrived just as promised. I stood up, clearing my throat loudly. The room, already slightly buzzed, fell silent. James looked surprised but mostly pleased. He probably assumed I was giving him a final, personal toast. "I'd like to propose a toast," I announced, holding up my water glass. My voice was surprisingly steady. "To James," I began, letting the name hang in the air. "To his incredible focus and his dedication to his overtime routine." I saw James's confident smile twitch slightly. He hadn't expected the reference to the long nights. "We all know James is a man who chases his dreams," I continued, pacing slowly around the table, "and he was always so careful to work on his big project in the most private spot in the office. The blind spot. My desk." Now, everyone was paying rapt attention. The atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to deeply uncomfortable. He told me, as his desk mate, that this project was a secret app. Something for financial modeling. Something he had to keep from the firm. I paused, meeting the CEO's gaze directly. But what he was really doing wasn't creating a project. He was compiling one. James's face was utterly pale. He slowly pushed back his chair, his eyes wide with rising terror. "Luke, what are you doing? Sit down. This isn't the time for jokes." I ignored him. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small, metallic flash drive. I placed it gently on the center of the linen tablecloth, right next to the CEO's plate. "This is what James was working on at my desk," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the small room. "It's not an app, sir. It's a file containing proprietary client lists, trade secrets, and our entire Q4 strategy. It's a copy of the company's most sensitive data, which he was planning to walk out with tomorrow and sell to our competitor." The room erupted. Gasps, chairs scraping back, and James, who had completely lost his composure, lunging toward the table. "Luke, you sick bastard. You set me up." This is a lie. He's crazy, he's jealous. James shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. I stood my ground, my heart finally slowing from sheer terror to cold resolve. He even had a cover story, I added, looking at the CO, not James. He used the convenient, juicy rumor of an affair to distract his wife and throw off suspicion. He used my desk as his shield, and he used the wrong number as his way of ensuring his private business looked like mere marital trouble instead of corporate espionage. The CEO, a formidable man named Mr. Harrington, picked up the USB drive. He didn't look at James, he looked at me. Luke, are you certain of this? I am, sir. I found it hidden under the carpet tile right where he always sat. And I have a witness, I said, nodding toward the door. Chloe stepped fully into the room, her eyes burning with triumph. She had completed the mission. The public expose was a success. James was cornered, his beautiful lie shattered, and his career was over. The room was a chaos of stunned silence and abrupt, angry noise. James completely lost it. He charged at the table, knocking over a crystal water pitcher that shattered on the marble floor. It's a frame-up. She put you up to this, Luke. You and my bitch wife. You're both crazy, he shrieked, his voice raw with pure, exposed fear. Security, who had clearly been alerted by Chloe's earlier presence or the initial commotion, flooded the room. They restrained James, who was fighting and yelling, desperately trying to snatch the USB drive off the table. Mr. Harrington, the CEO, remained unervingly composed. He simply nodded to the security detail. Escort Mr. James out of the building. Immediately. Do not allow him back on the premises. He then looked at the general counsel, who was already on his phone, face grim. Initiate full legal review. Secure his office, his desk, and all digital assets. This is industrial espionage. The public expose was horrific, brutal, and completely effective. James's reputation, his career, and his life were annihilated in less than 3 minutes. The man who had been the picture of confidence was dragged away, screaming accusations that no one in the room believed. Once the doors closed behind the commotion, a chilling silence settled back into the room. Mr. Harrington didn't speak to me immediately. He stood there, holding the tiny USB drive, the weight of the company's secrets literally in his hand. He finally turned to me, his expression unreadable. You were his deskmate. You were at the center of this. My heart hammered again. This was the moment of reckoning. I was the one who had spent hours right next to the crime. Sir, I was his unwitting cover, I stated clearly, projecting confidence I didn't entirely feel. He exploited the privacy of my desk and my professional trust. I had no idea what he was doing until his wife accidentally texted me, thinking I was involved in an affair. That's how I discovered the deception. I was placed in an impossible situation, either shield a man who was stealing from the firm, or expose him and clear my own name. I briefly recounted the initial honey text, the rising suspicion, and the coerced spying mission, leaving out nothing about Chloe's role except to credit her with alerting me to the true danger. I focused entirely on the fact that James used the lie of the affair to cover the truth of the corporate theft. Mr. Harrington listened, his expression softening slightly. He realized the sheer audacity of James's scheme. And you risked your position to bring this to my attention publicly, he concluded. I risked it to protect the firm, sir, and to protect my own integrity, I corrected. I wasn't going to let him turn this into a heroic act of loyalty. It was an act of survival. He nodded slowly. Very well, Luke. We will have a long talk in the morning. For now, you have done the right thing, however messy the execution was. The mess was precisely the point. The public nature of the confrontation ensured James had no chance to maneuver, no time to erase evidence, and no plausible denial. I had chosen a loud, definitive blast over a quiet, easily suppressed whisper. I walked out of that private room and found Chloe waiting by the main entrance. She didn't smile, but her eyes held a deep, quiet gratitude. You did it, Luke, she said, her voice barely audible. You proved he was a monster. He was using your marriage as a distraction, Chloe. He was using me as his human shield. I just removed the shield. The whole affair narrative, she mused, shaking her head. The perfect misdirection. I was so focused on finding the other woman, I never saw the stolen data right under my nose. I thought back to the initial, terrifying text. Honey, he's still at your desk, isn't he? The word, honey, was the emotional trigger, the ultimate red herring that threw her and me completely off the scent of the real betrayal. He told me to go meet you for coffee to shut down the affair rumor, I said, remembering James's desperate plea. That's how arrogant he was. He was certain he could make me clean up the personal mess so he could walk away cleanly with the corporate loot. But you told me the truth about the secrecy, even if you used his lie about the app. That small act of honesty is what changed everything, Luke. Thank you. We stood there for a moment, two unlikely co-conspirators who had just dismantled a man's life. She was free of a professional liar and a deceitful husband, and I was free of a dangerous secret that had threatened to derail my career. We had achieved a strange kind of resolution. We exchanged a brief, awkward handshake. I watched her walk away, a solitary, determined figure. The drama was over, the central conflict resolved. James was gone. The firm was safe. But as I walked out into the cool night air, the victory felt hollow. I had betrayed a colleague, albeit a deceitful one, and I had participated in a public, professional execution. I had survived, but I was no longer the simple, quiet guy who just loved spreadsheets. I was the man who brought James down. The feeling was a corrosive mix of relief and profound moral fatigue. The core question remained: what did I truly compromise to save myself? The story was over, but the lingering question of my own loyalty, to my conscience or to the corporate structure, would stick with me for a long, long time. The immediate fallout from the public expose was surreal. I spent the first few hours the next morning sequestered with Mr. Harrington and the firm's legal team. It was grueling. I recounted the entire timeline, from the initial, baffling honey text to the discovery of the hidden USB drive under my desk. The legal team meticulously documented everything, focusing entirely on the corporate espionage and the methods James used to conceal the theft. They were professional, intense, and utterly uninterested in the emotional drama. They treated James's marital issues as precisely what they were, a cleverly deployed distraction. The phrase, "he's still at your desk, isn't he?" was analyzed not as a jealous wife's suspicion, but as evidence of James's established pattern of utilizing my workspace as a secure, off-the-books location for his illegal activity. My role was quickly defined. I was the whistleblower who had averted a massive data breach. The fact that I had the foresight to deliver the evidence publicly, in front of the key decision-makers, was viewed as a strategic masterstroke, a decisive move that prevented James from executing any last-minute countermaneuvers. Mr. Harrington, in a private conversation after the legal review, looked at me with a mixture of respect and a touch of professional wariness. "Luke, you handled a volatile situation with extreme control," he said, leaning back in his executive chair. "You had a powerful moral dilemma, and you chose the firm. That is noted. That kind of loyalty, or ruthlessness, depending on how you look at it, is valuable." His use of the word ruthlessness stung, but I knew he was right. My decision to expose James so publicly was not just about truth. It was about ensuring my own survival and the total elimination of a threat. It was a calculated, professional betrayal. The next few weeks at the office were a bizarre mix of quiet normalcy and underlying electric tension. James's desk was sectioned off, his computer seized, and his presence erased with astonishing speed. People whispered, of course. The official story was vague, citing severe policy violations and imminent legal action, but the few people present at the dinner knew the whole, scandalous truth. My reputation changed overnight. I wasn't just the quiet guy who loved spreadsheets anymore. I was the guy who took down James, the office golden boy. Some people looked at me with grudging admiration, others with thinly veiled distrust. I had become the ethical barometer, the line in the sand. If Luke, the spreadsheet guy, was willing to expose a colleague over a principle, what else might he do? My relationship with Chloe ended as quickly as it began. We exchanged one final set of texts on the burner phone. "Chloe, the firm is suing him." It's done. Thank you for everything. Luke, you're welcome. Good luck with the divorce. Chloe, and Luke, about that honey text. I know I accused you of lying to protect him. I was wrong about that. But James did put your number in my phone months ago under the contact name Han. He told me it was honest IT guy, a guy who could help if my laptop crashed. I should have checked. It was just another layer of his deception. I stared at the screen, a final, chilling piece of the puzzle locking into place. James hadn't just used the idea of an affair. He had actively engineered the very possibility of the honey text to deflect suspicion. He had preemptively inserted my contact information into his wife's phone under a deceptively affectionate name, knowing that if she ever checked his calls or texts, she'd see contact with Han, assume it was the mistress, and focus her energy entirely on finding the other woman, instead of searching for the hidden data under my desk. The man was a psychological criminal mastermind. This revelation solidified the nature of my moral compromise. I hadn't just exposed an unfaithful husband. I had dismantled a carefully constructed system of deceit built by a truly dangerous professional. My betrayal of James was necessary, but it was still a betrayal. The ends had justified the means, but the means had stained my hands with ruthlessness. The firm tried to reward me. Mr. Harrington offered me a significant promotion and a bonus. I accepted the promotion because it was deserved, but I refused the bonus. I didn't want payment for acting on my conscience. The biggest change, however, was internal. The quiet confidence I once had was gone, replaced by a permanent, professional skepticism. I now saw every interaction through a lens of potential deception. I looked at the spot where James's desk used to be, now a sterile, empty patch of carpet. I thought about the desk swap incident, the frantic whisper of the secret app, lie, and the single, intimate word, honey, that had accidentally brought the whole house of cards crashing down. I realized that the truly viral element of this story wasn't the affair, but the cold, corporate maneuvering hidden beneath it. The biggest revelation was that I, Luke, the quiet guy, had the capacity to be the most dangerous person in the room when pushed to the edge. The immediate aftermath was clean, professionally speaking. I got the promotion, and the firm suffered minimal damage thanks to the timely recovery of the data. James's story quickly faded from office gossip, relegated to the occasional, cautionary whisper. Life, or at least corporate life, went back to normal. But for me, there was no going back to the old normal. I was fundamentally changed. The quiet observer had become the decisive actor, and that transformation carried a permanent emotional cost. I kept the burner phone for a few more weeks before finally smashing it and throwing it away. It was a tangible link to the chaos, the moral gray area I had inhabited as a reluctant spy. That physical act of destruction was my attempt at gaining emotional closure. The ultimate twist in this story wasn't the data theft, or even James's calculated deception. The twist was my own reaction, my transition from passive victim to ruthless survivor. I had been forced to choose between personal comfort and absolute, public truth, and I chose the latter, but not without calculation. I had a clear conscience about protecting the firm and myself, but I had permanently compromised my innocence. I often think about the finality of it all, James's professional and personal life, destroyed in a single, public moment. And I think about my role in that destruction. I was the one who was meant to clean up James's small lie about the affair, but I ended up exposing his massive lie about his career. The honey text was an invitation to a marital drama. The USB drive was an eviction notice from his entire life. The lasting lesson wasn't about the perils of cheating, but about the perils of trusting appearances. James was a man who cultivated a perfect professional image, and he was nearly successful in using that image and me to commit a huge crime. I learned that the loudest people often have the biggest secrets. Now, when I sit at my large, U-shaped desk, a new sense of quiet vigilance pervades my work. I still share the space, but now I watch the desk mate who replaced James, a young, earnest guy named Mike, with a different kind of attentiveness. I'm friendly, but I'm reserved. I'm efficient, but I'm never quite trusting. My corner of the desk, the alleged blind spot that James had used as his bunker, is now just a workspace. But for me, it remains a monument to a profound betrayal. I'll forever see the ghost of James, hunched over his illicit laptop, spinning his deceitful narratives, while the truth of his crime lay hidden inches from my own hand. The resolution is a strange kind of freedom. I am free from James, free from the toxic secret, and free from the confining illusion of my own passivity. The experience taught me that being a good guy doesn't mean being quiet or avoiding conflict. Sometimes, it means making the ugly, loud choice to expose the rot and protect what's right, even if it hurts. I am now more guarded, more perceptive, and perhaps, a little more cynical. The story of the coworker's wife who called me honey was, in the end, the story of how I stopped being a bystander and became the main character in my own, complicated, and morally ambiguous life. And that, I guess, is the lingering question I'm left with. Did I do the right thing because it was right, or because it was the only way to save myself? The answer is probably a little bit of both, and that's a truth I'm learning to live with.